Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, and Bethesda, they are guilty. Imagine living in a world where over the last 10 years we could have gotten multiple single-player Elder Scrolls games, Fallout titles as well, and then it doesn't happen because Bethesda are jealous of competent game developers. This is sadly the reality we are living in. And we know this thanks to writer Chris Avellone. If you're not familiar with Chris, he is a long-term game developer and writer of many great role-playing games, including Fallout 2. He's been with the series a long time. New Vegas as well. He was at Obsidian when they made that great game, one of the best Fallouts. He also designed Planescape Torment, a great 90s RPG similar to the old Baldur's Gate games, that isometric style. Knights of the Old Republic 2, he's got a great record. And to give you all the context of what's going on, a news website has basically dug up some tweets from Chris from a year or two ago. In those tweets, he revealed that Obsidian had made multiple proposals to develop spin-offs for Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, all of which were turned down by Bethesda, and that makes sense. Obsidian made Fallout New Vegas. It was very well received by fans. It's always been puzzling to many why we didn't get more of those. Why didn't we get a New Vegas version of Skyrim, for instance? The Elder Scrolls Skyrim releases, juggernaut success, and then absolutely nothing for 15 plus years. We haven't seen a single player Elder Scrolls title since then. And yet with Fallout 3, a year or two later, we get New Vegas, another full-fledged Fallout from the Obsidian studio. Now that in itself isn't actually new information. We've known that for a little while. But today, Chris himself has given more context to the situation. And let me tell you, if you thought Bethesda were incompetent before, if you thought their writers, like Emil, if you thought Todd Howard, they were a little bit stupid, you've seen nothing yet. If we look at Chris's tweet here, he responds to the article that's doing the rounds about his old tweets, and he comments on them. He says, "This is true. One of the Elder Scrolls proposals, which he pitched himself, it was intended to serve the same function as Fallout New Vegas did between Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. So again, it makes sense. Skyrim comes out, all that work's been done on the engine, it's immensely popular. Surely you'd want another game coming out soon. And given the fact that Bethesda, over the years, it's taken them longer and longer to release games. They released Fallout 3, I believe in 2008, 3 years later we get Skyrim, 4 years later we get Fallout 4, and then obviously 8 years later we get Starfield. So they've taken longer and longer to develop games, and a solution like this, you would think it would have been perfect. This is a highly decorated writer. It's not like the day before studio, before they got exposed, a bunch of nobodies going to Bethesda and saying, hey, can we make a game in your universe? We're definitely not going to do some sort of rug pull. This is someone highly respected, and Obsidian, the studio he worked at, highly respected RPG studio, who were ready for more. They'd already delivered with New Vegas. They'd proved themselves. Fans loved them, loved what they were doing with Bethesda IPs, and yet when Obsidian went to Bethesda, suggested that they make a game in the Elder Scrolls universe, Bethesda said no. I wonder why. I wonder why this has happened, and we are going to find out. The truth is going to be exposed. And Chris goes on to say that the purpose of this was to provide more adventures in the setting during the years before the next Bethesda release. And it makes so much sense, because if you think about Bethesda's release schedule, the Elder Scrolls games, where they're set, you've got Daggerfall, you've got Morrowind, Cyrodiil, Skyrim. As a new game comes out, the older ones feel more and more aged. So imagine if Obsidian could go back to some of those older settings with, say, the Skyrim engine, and can make a new game in those regions. It would keep it interesting, fresh. It's not just a Skyrim 2, it's a brand new adventure in Tamriel. A bit like New Vegas was for 3. It was a completely new city, new setting, and it allows Obsidian to really put their own unique spin on things. They are much more known for their writing, for creating characters. engaging quest lines with a lot of choice, a lot of nuance around them. You know those quests where you need to make that decision, and there's not just one answer that feels good. They both feel like they could be good depending on the character you're role-playing, or how you feel about what's going on, the factions that you're invested in. They're so good at that, whereas with Bethesda, you get choices like, hey, there's a murderous psychopath, should we lock him up? Or are you happy to let him wander off and kill a bunch of families? What choice feels better for you? It's always very black and white. You think of the megaton bomb. Do you want it to blow up the whole town? Or should we disarm it? It's really basic stuff. And some people will argue that Bethesda have always been better at, say, the exploration, the storytelling around discovering in the world. And that's fair, I get it. Something like Fallout 3, there probably are more dungeons, more stories to uncover just in the world outside of quests, but that's a good thing as well. This is why this would have worked so well, because you have Obsidian focused on the story-orientated entries, and then Bethesda can do their thing as well. It's the best of both worlds for different types of fans, but Bethesda didn't let it happen, and that's what we're going to uncover. Chris goes on to say, I thought it couldn't hurt to try and push a similar system to what Treyarch Activision had going with Call of Duty at the time, but hopefully less rushed. And some of you might have seen Call of Duty there. It's made you do a double take. It's made me think about, would I rather play the Modern Warfare 3 campaign or would I rather play Starfield? At least the Modern Warfare campaign is shorter, I'll give it that. But the point he's making is sound. Instead of one studio having to rush out the next entry in a series, you can essentially have a couple of studios working together in tandem. For instance, Bethesda, they could release The Elder Scrolls 6 in 2026, and then you could have Obsidian release the next entry, a spin-off in 2029, and so on. Gamers are happy, they're getting more Elder Scrolls, and it's not as if you'd be getting one high-quality one and then a low-quality one. They'd just be different. They'd have different strengths. Although with Bethesda, Starfield, do they have any strengths anymore? That is a question. He does go on to mention that his proposal maybe isn't as relevant now because of the Elder Scrolls Online. I'm not sure I agree with that. I really don't think that the Elder Scrolls Online is filling that gap for anyone. It's an MMO. It plays like an MMO. It is not a single-player open-world RPG. It might look similar. It's first-person. It's got some of the architecture, but it's not the same. You see it with Skyrim. Why are there 10,000 plus players every day on Steam? It's because people miss it. People want that kind of experience. They don't want a freaking MMO. It's overpriced as well. If you look it up, they seem to release an expansion every year. It costs pretty much the price of a full game, and apparently they always have barely any content in them. It's just more fleecing. I get the sense from some devs that they think anyone who plays an online game has to be stupid, and therefore it's easy to take all of their money. That seems to be the mindset. It's quite sad. I think there's potential with online games, but for me personally, I prefer the single-player ones, and Avellone was absolutely in the right proposing what he did. They should have gone for it. Bethesda fucked up. This is one of the more damning tweets, and it isn't the last one. There's a bit more to this as well. But he says, not surprisingly, his idea didn't gain much traction, and he never got the impression that Bethesda were happy with Fallout New Vegas's reception. That is super damning to hear from Chris himself, a genuine New Vegas developer, because there's always been that inkling that Bethesda were jealous because Fallout 3 comes out, it gets a good reception. But who are the people praising it? It is mostly people who've never experienced a Fallout game before. They are maybe Elder Scrolls fans, open world game fans, and they lick it up because, yeah, it's Oblivion with guns. It's just like Elder Scrolls with guns. But then New Vegas comes out, and fans see the potential for this series. They see what a post-apocalyptic setting can look like for a role-playing game. Rich quest lines, a great realistic world to explore. It doesn't feel like an amusement park. You have those factions, you have those characters. It's so rich in detail. And you get the sense that Bethesda were maybe a little bit salty. They weren't happy at being one-upped. proven incompetent. We saw from Mr. Emil, one of the main Bethesda writers the other day, that, no one can be critical unless they're game developers. Well, Chris Avellone, he's a game developer, he's highly qualified, and he critiqued you in the best way possible by making something that was way better, that impressed fans, and made them kind of realize, hey, maybe Bethesda aren't so good. And unfortunately, casual fans wouldn't have even known that Obsidian made New Vegas. They would have just assumed, it's another Fallout from those Fallout guys. I'll buy it, I'll check it out. And a lot of those fans, they were giving feedback saying, this is really good, I hope the next Fallout's like this. And Bethesda, they weren't happy. They thought they'd cracked the secrets to Fallout. Nothing could beat them. And then you get Fallout 4, middling story, all the problems that 3 had, but amplified. The voice acting, RPG elements were somewhat eliminated to make room for the casual fan. And as Emil, the lead story designer at Bethesda, said, gamers don't care about narrative RPG systems. They just want to blow stuff up. They're really dumb. But that all blew up in Bethesda's face, because when Fallout 4 came out, they didn't win Game of the Year that year, a bit like they lost this year. Starfield lost to Baldur's Gate 3. Back in 2015, Fallout 4 went up against The Witcher 3, and they lost mostly because The Witcher 3 had a much better narrative, better quests. It was a much more well-rounded experience. And New Vegas was just that, back in 2010, 2011, when that title came out. Bethesda was salty. That's what this is about. And Chris does mention that they weren't happy with both good and bad feedback. They weren't happy with the good feedback because it made them look like hacks. It made people realize they wanted a rich experience from Fallout, not just to run around with a gun, Mr. Happy, turn the radio on, we don't need any depth, let's just go and kill shit, kill the rat roaches, kill the ghouls, we don't need anything else. That's what they thought. It wasn't the case. When they refer to bad feedback, what was the negative press like? It really just referred to bugs, glitches in the game. Obsidian's titles, New Vegas included, they are often janky, but why is that? It's mostly because they are rarely working on their own IPs. They're often hired by some other publisher who tells them to make a sequel to a game in quick time. So Bethesda gave them 18 months to work on New Vegas. They pretty much said you've got to beat something like a 90 Metacritic score or you're not getting your bonus, which Obsidian was heavily relying on for their staff to get paid. But they had such a short window to develop this game, of course it was going to be buggy when it came out. Bethesda set them up to fail. Fallout 3, I think that was in development before Oblivion came out in 2006, so they easily had 3+ years to work on it. Obsidian gets screwed over, and yet they're whinging about the bad feedback that New Vegas got. Are you fucking kidding me? Starfield was in development for 8 years, and you don't even have a fucking map in your game, and you're criticizing other developers who already did a better job than you. You're a pathetic company. And people are agreeing with this as well. Bethesda didn't want Obsidian to release better titles than them. Exactly. Avellone is saying that. He's got to be a little bit diplomatic, but you can tell it's the truth. Just to back Chris up as well, I mean, he's one dev, and some people might say they disagree, but this is Jason Schreier. He's a bit of a ning-nong, but he is reliable for insider stories and things like that. And he said years ago, before all this came out, that a lot of folks at Bethesda hate New Vegas because people love it so much more than their own Fallout games. And he was basically, in context, talking about why Obsidian wouldn't be able to make any more games. So there's a lot backing up this story. The truth that Bethesda, they are jealous. And there is actually more from Chris here. For instance, you get this Bethesda tard, someone just super salty that no one likes Bethesda anymore. It's hard to blame them considering how broken New Vegas was at launch. Of course, they didn't get you to make more games. And Chris says, yes, that was one of the bad points. Yes, it had numerous issues at launch. that we could have worked harder to resolve. And yet even still, Avellone isn't making any excuses. He acknowledges that maybe they could have done a better job. You do the same to Bethesda, you call their game boring batshit. What do they come back with? Oh, you just need to make a new character. If you play for 150 hours, that's not enough. Get to 200 hours, that's the sweet spot. You'll be able to explore all these planets. We worked so hard on this game, just consume it. Just buy the special edition when we release it. You know we will. They go on to say, in the comments, I get the impression Bethesda is a tad salty that New Vegas is regarded as the best Fallout game to this very day. It's definitely one of them, easily better than 3 and 4, not a tough decision. Someone else says Bethesda didn't want to be shown up by another studio yet again. Recent articles discussing the internal workings of Bethesda paint them as quite egotistical in the best sense and outright narcissistic in the worst. True. And here's another tweet from Chris where he mentions one of the ideas they presented, which Bethesda sadly rejected. It would essentially be, imagine if the hero you played as in Skyrim or Oblivion, if they failed in their quest and the villains won. What sort of world would that be? Would it be sort of post-apocalyptic, but in a fantasy setting? It would be dark, you'd have demons ravaging the world, ransacking towns, and you're in the middle, and now you need to save the day. It sounds like a unique spin, given in so many of the Elder Scrolls games, if not all of them, you play as the chosen champion, the Dragonborn, the hero. Sometimes that gets a bit old, and you actually just want to start off as a nobody who needs to earn their place in the world. You have to earn that reputation. You don't want to become the leader of the Mages Guild overnight, even though you don't even know what a spell is, how it works. And this sounds like what Chris Avellone was going for. Something different. It would have provided new insights into the Elder Scrolls universe, but of course, that was too interesting for Bethesda. It had to be scrapped, sadly. Now, this last one, it's actually an older tweet, but I've never seen it before. It seems to have gone a little bit under the radar. It does say a lot in 2023, though, about Bethesda's culture and why something like Starfield is so bad and why they have this attitude. So someone criticized Todd Howard, and I'll be honest, I've criticized Todd Howard a few times. I might have made fun of him. However, Chris actually says that Todd's a good guy and was always nice and respectful towards the Obsidian team. In fact, he would often say that we should check with him whenever anyone in his studio at Bethesda would say, well, Todd said, because chances are he didn't. And it sounds like he's saying that Obsidian could go to Bethesda management and say, hey, we had this great idea for a game, or maybe while they were developing New Vegas, they had some ideas for the setting, and maybe Bethesda's management would go, no, you can't do that. Todd said it's got to be like how Todd wanted it. And then Chris goes to check with Todd, and he says, what the fuck are you talking about? I never said that. You can do what you want. There's a lot of angles with this. I mean, Todd could be a two-faced liar. We don't know. The management team, they could just be totally incompetent. They just assume things. Or they could be two-faced as well. They don't want anyone else to do anything with their ideas, so they pin it all on Todd. I'll say this about him. If we're talking about a passionate game developer at Bethesda, Todd is probably the last one that I can see there. He's obviously been a clown. He said some dumb things. He's lied about things, let's be honest, exaggerated. But I do think he is an old school RPG guy in that he developed Morrowind, probably the only Bethesda title I can think of that is objectively good in most areas. He is a fan of a lot of old school 90s RPGs as well. He's got good influences. You can maybe say Todd is the best of a bad lot. You hear him, and then you hear Emil. It is a vast difference in just how stupid some of those Bethesda employees sound. The entire company's incompetent. We're hearing it now from the horse's mouth. Chris Avellone, who has worked directly with that team, he knows they're stupid. He's being diplomatic, but now we all know it. Elder Scrolls 6, it barely has a hope, and I honestly wouldn't care if Microsoft got other teams working on it. Things can't get any worse. We've seen it with Starfield. We want our exploration back. Someone make it happen. But thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.